Well, friends, welcome to another episode of Create or Die. It's your host, Ike, and we're coming at you with episode number 68. Can you believe it? Just charging right on through these things. And in today's episode, we're going to dive a little deeper, if you will, into the practicality of design, specifically around branding and how we can brand ourselves, our business, a client, whatever it is. We're going to talk about what that is, just from one dude's perspective, kind of pulling from things that I've learned over the years and what's important, and without getting too important for ourselves. You know how that's possible, how we can be like, oh, look at me, I'm a designer and I'm a branding specialist. No, we're not doing that. We're talking about today, the world we live in, the matter of fact, Alex Hormozy style, third grade level, do this, and this is why. So if that's something that interests you, or you think you can find maybe some value out of that, then please join me on this episode, the branding episode for dummies, if you will. Create or die. So, here we are. Once again, we're doing our thing. And I haven't ever taken a moment to call this out. And I think now's as good as any. We've got some awesome contributors to our pod, okay? Obviously, we have some amazing guests that we bring in from time to time, and always grateful to them. But I'm talking about the people that make it happen week in, week out. And first and foremost, I want to call out REDDEK, who's actually my 19-year-old son, who has taken this podcast, the video version, to a whole nother level with his editing expertise. And I say video version, but there's some editing involved in the audio side of things as well, because you're hearing the same audio from what was uploaded as the video. So REDDEK, you're the man. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Additionally, we have our music maestro, and his moniker is unpronounceable by the human tongue. I call it wow, but that's wrong, But look him up. It's in the credits, it's in the description. Go check out his SoundCloud for some other awesome, amazing beats, if you will. So props to those guys for helping me produce this podcast for all. Okay, all y'all. So as promised, in this episode, wanted to get kind of real about branding yourself, or branding something bigger than yourself, your business, your client's business, whatever it is. And what does that mean? Now, again, this is not an exercise in look how smart I am. I'm going to use all the technical terms and processes that will astound you with my vocabulary, because we all know that that's not impressive. What I want to do is break it down in a way that someone listening to this who has never even thought about branding themselves or their business or what that even is. I mean, because a lot of us, initially it's like, what is your brand? Well, it's my logo, right? When you look at where branding came from in the beginning, it's from back in the day, when ranchers, they had their cattle, and cattle would kind of mix up sometimes. Maybe you had a few ranchers working together to move cattle from one point A to point B, and you don't want to be like, no, that's my cow, that's my steer, give it to me, it's mine, because his name's Jack, and you can tell just by looking at him that that's his name, right? No, we needed some way to mark these animals to show ownership, and so the brand was created. If any of you out there watch the series Yellowstone, you look at that Y and like a cross, and maybe there's another line in there somewhere, but it was a unique way of doing the Yellowstone's brand. And they would, heat up that iron and bam, stick that cow with their brand. And initially, when you're out in the West, you don't have a little way to funnel them in and protect yourself, so you got to rope them, get them pinned to the ground, brand them. It hurts, even a cow, and that was a brand. So it's easy for us today, especially if we're new to branding, to think, okay, what's your brand? Well, it's a logo. Okay, you might say, look at your dumb head right now. You've got the Create or Die skull on your cap, right? And you might say, oh, that must be your brand. But if you've seen my logo, it's got the words, the text, Create or Die, in addition to, this skull, which is actually a pretty small part of the logo. But again, or maybe I'm just saying this for the first time, I lose track of myself, that is part of your brand, but your logo is not your brand. And I would argue, even back in the day, ranches, even though the brand, you would create a brand that would be burned into the hide of the cow, even back then, when someone saw the brand of a neighboring ranch, something was put into their mind. They either thought, oh wow, that belongs to Mr. Dutton, and I'm not going to be caught dead with one of his cows, or I'm going to be dead, right? Because that is what I think of when I think of that brand. When I see that Yellowstone Y, he's the biggest, baddest landowner around. I've heard about how their cowboys are, their crew. They're tough. They shoot first and ask questions later. So now that, my friend, is their brand. It's what others think of you, if you're talking about you as a personal brand, or of your business, or your ranch in this example. And so while you can come up with a brand plan and write brand promise and statements about, if you were to take our brand and put it into some famous person, iconify it. I know there's a better word. I've lost it. But, if our brand were to be represented by one famous person, who would it be? So somebody might say, oh, it would be, John Wayne. And so when someone sees our brand, we want them to think of John Wayne. Or let's think of someone else, someone more modern. When someone looks at our clothing line for women, ages, 17 to 35, we want them to think of Taylor Swift. Like, this is where Taylor Swift might shop. So you can come up with an idea of like how you want to steer your brand, or how you would like people to perceive you. But just by putting that into a brand statement or into your brand guidelines, it doesn't make that your brand. In the end, we can't control what others think of us. Let's look at some existing brands out there, okay, and think about what comes to mind when you think of this brand or that brand. Let's think of let's just throw one out here. Disney. There was a time when, and don't mean to get political here, but when Disney was, hey, family values, it's Disneyland, we are safe, we know we can show our kids any of their films and not be worried about hidden messages that are more adult, or they watch the teeny bopper shows on the Disney Channel where it's, young kids experiencing life. There was a time where it was like, yeah, wholesome family values, but that's changed over the past several years. Instead, it's obvious that Disney has an agenda, and whether you agree with it or not, me personally, I don't necessarily want my kids exposed to some of that stuff so early on. Even if you think they might not pick up on it, they do. And I'm not alone. There's a lot of parents out there who have decided that, Disney no longer means family values. Now it means, the elite, the rich and famous are the only ones that can afford to go to the parks, right? Or your, the shows you watch or that are produced, that there's going to be some kind of undertone of something that favors one side of the aisle or the other. And I've gone too deep into this, but you get my meaning. It has changed. You think about Pixar, which is part of Disney. It used to be, every Pixar film that was released made $1 billion worldwide. Now, it's like they're just one of 10 other decent studios out there. Why is that? I would argue that the founding members, Ed Catmull and John Lasseter, their departure had a big part of it, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that, and it's the world as a whole. Things have changed, but the brand has changed as well. So let's get out of this example and into another one. What are some other brands? Okay, you think about McDonald's. Okay, now when McDonald's comes to mind, you're not thinking quality food, the best, and it's gonna win a Michelin star or something. When you think of McDonald's, maybe you're envisioning that perfect Coca-Cola that isn't good for you, but if you're gonna drink it, you might as well get it from McDonald's. Or you're thinking about their signature Big Mac, right? There's a lot of bread, which is, too much bread in my opinion, but they got that Big Mac sauce and then that perfect amount of lettuce. And when you're craving a Big Mac, there's only one place to go get it: the Happy Meal. Those are all things that make up the brand. You don't think of McDonald's as, the best quality. You think of McDonald's as food at a value, isn't healthy, but it brings a smile to my face, and it's a guilty pleasure. And everybody needs a little McDonald's from now and again, right? But on the flip side, you think of Ruth's Chris, which is a high-end steakhouse. It's still a chain, but you're going to go in there and you're not going to spend any less than $300 for two people. It's going to be really hard. And I'm simplifying this, oversimplifying this probably, and there's some out there who are true experts that would call out other things. The point I'm trying to get out, again, my opinion, is that your brand is not your logo, it's not your color palette, it's not your commercials, but instead it's the perception that others have of you. What does the majority of people think about when they think of your brand. And so does that mean we have no control over it, and so therefore why are we even talking about this? It's just something that happens. Well, yeah, your brand can happen to you, and that is the danger, because in most cases it's not gonna turn out good. It might, you got the owner, the founder, they have a specific idea in mind of what the brand is. As they relate with customers, they do it in a certain way, and that customer reciprocates that feeling and does it in terms of helping to monetize their business or whatever. They, look at Chick-fil-A. So in a lot of ways, that's on the same level as McDonald's, but the experience is so much different, because when you go there, you're going to be treated with respect. People are going to say my pleasure. They're going to be dressed nicely. They're going to be courteous. Your order is usually going to be right, where you can't always say that about McDonald's. And why is that? Because Chick-fil-A has put a lot of effort into ensuring that they drill into their associates that, this is how we treat a customer. This is how we act in front of a customer. And even to the point where they're not just handing out franchises left and right. I mean, Chick-fil-A could be 10 times the size as it is right now, like McDonald's, but instead, their franchisees, they go through a process that's like equivalent to a college player getting into the NBA or the NFL. That they have to be focused 100% on that one Chick-fil-A franchise. They have to be all in. It's not just like a side hustle. It's not, they can't even, in 99.9% of cases, these franchisees only have one location, because Chick-fil-A knows that if they're involved 100% and if they've handpicked these people, that they can control the brand promise, which is you're going to get quality food, made well, delivered by associates who care, and so on. And so that's why when I think of Chick-fil-A, that's what we get. So it's similar to your brand. I've got this podcast, for example, and for the past year plus, it's been a side gig. It's been something that has evolved over the time that we've been doing it, and in some ways devolved maybe, and I haven't been able to give it the attention that I would like. I'm sporadic with my social posts about it, and I'm all over the place when I do post something. If anything, my social posts are consistently boring, because I only have so much time to dedicate to this. So, there were 2 or 3 early on where I spent some time to actually kind of create some limited animated things, and those got the best response and kind of embodied what I wanted my brand to embody, which was some, irreverence, yet, some, what's the term, like brutalist design, where it's kind of cut out paper and, just kind of rough around the edges, but it's obviously intentional. And then, there's a level of sincerity and authenticity, all those things. But instead, I find myself of late looking like everyone else who has a middle of the road podcast where it's like, okay, let's just grab a quick clip. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but at least we've got something out there, right? Because you think it's a numbers game. But 9 times out of 10, I put those jokers on freaking YouTube shorts, and guess what? They don't do well. Surprise, surprise. They may even get 0 views, whereas these ones that are actually entertaining and I put some time into, people want to watch that. And so that's kind of overall what I'm trying to get at. If you have an idea of who you are, how you want people to perceive you, it's like you've got to define that, okay? Like, I'm someone who's lighthearted, I'm someone who's easygoing, I dress down most of the time, I am unassuming, yet I'm fun and likable. And when you're talking about my work ethic, I'm reliable, I'm fast, and the quality is, top shelf, right? Let's say that's what I wanted to try to project. Look at this, I'm destroying my brand right now by stepping all over my freaking words, right? But hey, that's the approachable, vulnerable side of the brand. So we're going to keep it. So, once you've defined that, who you are, who your company is, how you want others to perceive it, well, then it's a matter of looking at, okay, every time I have a touch point with another person or a prospect or the masses, because I've created some visual that I'm going to put on social media, every time that happens, I've got to go through my checklist of, does this meet the level of quality that I want to convey? Does this have the education factor? Will people find this interesting? And so forth. And if it doesn't meet those things, then you've got to ask yourself, okay, am I willing to compromise on my brand promise a little bit, to get this out there, just to kind of check the box? And obviously, I've been willing to make that compromise up to this point. But going forward, as I go 100% in to my own thing, an agency of one, which includes this content creation, which is the podcast, the YouTube channel, the edutainment type of stuff, then, no more. I started it, and in the past I talked about how important it is to just start something. You've been prompted, inspired, nudged, however you want to say it, to go out and do this thing. So rather than making sure that everything's perfect and you're going to do it right, you're going to hit the ground running perfectly, just get started. In the end, that's the important thing, because a brand can evolve, especially when we're talking at this level. It's a lot harder for like a McDonald's to go from fast food to high-end cuisine and make that shift with the same brand. They would have to completely reinvent themselves. But at this level, a create or die, relatively, well, not even relatively, it's small. It's a small, tiny, insignificant, I'll say it, brand right now. But if I don't want that to be the case forever, then I iterate. I fail fast. And like I've said in the past, and I heard it somewhere, and I think it's great, is you can't steer a parked car, right? So the fact that we've got that momentum, we're taking advantage of the moment, but we've got momentum, we're moving forward, we make a mistake, we see a hurdle coming up, we can steer, we can weave, we can navigate ourselves around that obstacle. And so for me personally, that's where I'm at. I'm going from just a part-time, 20% of my time type of a focused to 100% of my non-family personal time is dedicated to the Create or Die brand, the umbrella that is content creation, design consulting, edutainment, which falls under the content creation. Yeah. So think about it. This is one dude's opinion based on a bunch of other people's opinions and tried and true truths, if you will. How can you apply this to yourself, to what you're doing? And think about, how do you want others to perceive you? And so I'm going to give you some tactical stuff now, like some things that you can just go and do. So we talked about social media, video clip, making sure that you've taken the time and you're being intellectually honest with yourself that, hey, this is either something I would watch or I wouldn't, and I'm embarrassed to put this up, or what, But it's like, think about what it is you're doing. So it can be as simple as this. So let's say I'm a designer and I'm working at a tech company, and the dress code is pretty flexible. You can seriously dress down, or you can dress pretty classy. Either way, it's acceptable. So you're a designer, but you want to be the creative director. You want to convey to the CMO, the other VPs around you or whatever, that you should be taken serious. Well, what does that look like? Look at it from the outside in. How does a creative director dress? How do they conduct themselves? Are they opinionated? Do they always just kind of hem and haw and go with the flow? Do they take chances? What does that look like? And you've got to decide that for yourself, And it's going to be different in every situation. But there is something to be said about dress for success, right? And that is part of branding. It's like, if you start doing the job that you want, then relatively quickly, people are going to envision you in that position. They're going to be like, yeah, that person has the attributes we're looking for. They've demonstrated it. It's a no-brainer. I'd be dumb not to put that person in that position. So dress for success. That's one way you can do it with a personal brand. It's a similar thing with your business, your website. That's like your clothing. I mean, that's what people look at you from afar and judge you on. And it's not always, let's dig deep, pull back the layers. Is the content really meaty and deliver on the promise? Instead, it's just like from I hate to say it, a superficial place. Either this website conveys professionalism, it looks contemporary, it speaks to the right audience, because a website that's going to work for a tech company, that look and feel, that design is not necessarily going to work for bespoke, hand-crafted, furniture company. There can be some overlap, but in the end, it's going to be different. Just like me dressing for success as a creative leader would look different than a lawyer dressing for success. Okay? So there you go. Dress for success. Be it personally, your website, every visual that you create is the dressing, the window dressing of your store, of your business. Nowadays in this digital world, it really is like this display window is, you've got a few seconds, someone comes to your website or they see a social ad. That's a peek into this world. Just like the physical stores, FAO Schwartz, Selfridges in England, what does that window display look like and how can it pull me in? So do your thumbnails pull your viewers into your video? Again, looking at myself, I would say 9 times out of 10, no, because it's just been a exercise of let's do something that's good enough. Because one of my aphorisms is done is better than perfect. And that can get you in trouble, but it can also pay the bills. So there's balance. What else? Well, your work ethic. Whether you're an individual or you're a team that's part of a bigger company, or you're a business, like we talked about with Chick-fil-A, or In-N-Out. You see into the kitchen in those places. People are hustling, they're working quick, they're dressed sharply, they're treating you respectfully. You can tell that they're doing everything that they can to give you, the customer, the best experience. So how does that apply to someone who's a creative, right? If you're someone who thinks so highly of themselves that your time is so sacred that you push people off, or you don't keep your commitments, someone asks you to do something, you forget about it. And I'm not saying this from a soapbox. I've made all these mistakes time and time again, even recently, heaven forbid, and because it can happen. Mistakes happen, but what do you do to remedy those? Those are all part of the brand that you're building. When someone thinks of you or your business or your department, do they think, oh, those people are great to work with, or I know when I need something delivered on time, on budget, at top shelf quality? Are they talking about you, your brand, your business? That's something you have to ask yourself, and that's assuming that's what you want. There are some brands out there that are like, purposefully hard to work with, or put off this air and arrogance of being better than, and that's because they don't want to appeal to the masses. They want to create some kind of air about them, or they're hard to work with, but man, the quality is just amazing. And so just know that if you're in a hurry, you don't go with this person, or if you're on a tight budget or timeline, you don't go with this group. But if you want something that's just crazy, coming from left field, avant-garde kind of stuff, then you go with this person, and they're a tormented soul, and that's part of their mystique. Personally, I've found that that's pretty hard to pull off, and usually people who do that are their light shines brightly for a short time, and then maybe You know, it's like those artists of the past, like Van Gogh, who, you know, was kicking against the, I forget the term, the pricks, kicking against the pricks, and creating an art style that wasn't desirable at the time. And so he couldn't have been a commercial artist. I mean, back then it was like, you're a portrait artist, famous, wealthy people, they want their portrait painted because there's no such thing as cameras or photography, and you know, this is how you do it, and everybody might capture it slightly differently. You know, so the best, you know, somehow capture a likeness that isn't even seen, it's felt. You know, but Van Gogh had these rough strokes that were intentionally not perfect, and his subjects were of those of the lower class working people. They weren't posed, you know, and so yeah, all of his success came after his death, which, you know, I don't know about you, but that's not what I'm going for. So I think I've beat this dead horse pretty vigorously at this point. So I hope that helps. You know, those are some of my thoughts on brand, some tactics on how you can maybe do some things on your end without, you know, hiring a brand specialist or anything, to help kind of nudge the vision, the image that people have of you or your brand in their minds. And there's obviously a lot more you can do, and it's just a concert of things, you know. And again, I apologize for my lack of vocabs today, but hopefully you've been able to take the knowledge nugs here within and make something of it. And so again, I thank you for joining me on what has been another episode of Create or Die. So until next time, my friends, just keep on creating. Create or die.